Welcome to this crash course in the Italian wine region of Sicily. You're going to learn exactly what makes Sicily a unique wine producing region, what types of Sicilian wines are out there, and where you should begin your journey in tasting these wines. I'm Tony Margiotta. I'm a wine importer and author of this book called Hidden Gems of Italy. My life's mission is to look for world-class artisanal wines handcrafted in small batches coming straight out of Italy. My family's from a small village in the Molise region of southern Italy, and I've been traveling there for over 20 years, immersing myself in Italian food, wine, and culture. So first of all, where is Sicily? Well, it's that triangular shaped island in the southern part of Italy. It's right smack in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea. I call it the heartbeat of the Mediterranean. And, since it was smack in the middle of the Mediterranean, many different types of people traveled and conquered that island because it was so easily accessible. It was conquered by the Arabs, by the Normans, the Romans, and also the Greeks. I'd say, based on what I know about Sicilian history, I'd say the Greeks probably have left the biggest mark of influence on Sicilian culture, maybe besides the Romans. And you can still see ancient Greek temples today in Sicily. The Sicilians today are unearthing what is probably one of the most important wine regions in Italy today. And that story goes all the way back a couple thousand years. When the Greeks arrived in Sicily, the Greeks were the master winemakers of the ancient world 2,000 years ago. No one knew more about winemaking than the Greeks did. But when they got to Sicily, they noticed that the natives were making better wine than they did, and they didn't have half the knowledge that the Greeks had about winemaking. So what was the difference? Well, it was the soil, the climate, and the grape varietals. The perfect intersection of those things produced great wines, and that's still true today. You can find great Sicilian wines from vineyards on the coastline. You can find great wines from Mount Etna, the volcano, which have become really popular worldwide of late. And you can even find great wines high up in the Madonie Mountains in north central Sicily. So which types of wine does Sicily make? Well, you've all heard of Cabernet and Merlot and Pinot Noir. None of those are Sicilian wines. Sicily actually has their own native grape varietals, and they also have their own subregions. And so I would ask you, in terms of thinking about Sicilian wines, I'd think of the grape varietal first, and then I'd think about where it's coming from in Sicily later. It's a little bit more of an advanced aspect to it. I wouldn't get hung up on it. I mean, as you can see in this little map, and I'll blow it up later, there's a lot of appellations. And so I'd rather you focus a little bit more on the native Sicilian grapes, because that's really going to make the biggest difference in terms of your wine tasting experiences. And so, before I go over some of these grape varietals, I will say that most of them are pretty easy to find, but that the best versions of these wines are going to be coming from small artisanal producers that are focusing more on quality and expressing the originality of the area where the wines are coming from. That's a stark contrast from the mass-produced wines, which are not focused really on originality, but sort of trying to satisfy millions and millions of people by replicating using mass industrial farming practices. They're trying to sort of copy whatever the flavors are popular of the day. And so you sort of lose that authenticity with mass-produced wines. So if you can, and before you judge any of these grape varietals that I've listed here, make sure you find at least one or two small batch Sicilian wines coming from an artisanal producer, someone who makes less than 50,000 bottles a year of any of these varietals. Do that before you sort of put a check mark on any of these grapes before you move on. Now, with the whites, The very first white varietal I'd go after is Catarratto. Then there's also Perricone, Grillo, and Insolia. I highly recommend that you look for monovarietals of these wines so that you can taste the essence of what the varietal tastes like and how it performs. But if you're also curious about blends, there's the Mount Etna Bianco, the white version, and that's historically a blend of both Catarratto and Perricone. On the reds, you have Nero d'Avola, which is really the king of red wine in Sicily. You cannot go to a Sicilian restaurant and not see a Nero d'Avola on the wine list. In fact, you'll probably see 5 different Nero d'Avola on the list. And you might even, if you order like house wine at any of the restaurants, most likely it's going to be Nero d'Avola. Then there's Perricone, Frappato, and Nero Mascalese. Sicily has way more grape varietals than this. They have many, many grape varietals, but I would start with these. These are the main ones. And, you know, Sicilian wines, they have a little bit of everything. I mean, they've got super light-bodied wines like the Frappato, and they also have very, very full-bodied wines like the Nero d'Avola, or especially Perricone tends to be even more full-bodied, age-worthy, more structured type of wine. And actually, I'll show you a picture. This is a picture of the Perricone grape. Notice how it looks a little bit like a blueberry. That's because it's loaded with antioxidants. For those of you who are health-minded red wine drinkers, Perricone would be a great choice. And this is the wine map of all the appellations in Sicily. There's no need to learn them all. I mean, unless you are a die-hard Sicilian wine fan, this could be a great map for you to sort of explore and look for different wines. But I would just stick with a few. I'd recommend you try Cerasuolo di Vittoria, which is the only DOCG in Sicily. It's a blend of Nero d'Avola and Frappato. Very, very interesting blend. It's typically 50-50, sometimes 60-40%. Then there's Valle d'Olmo DOC, which is a newer appellation that comes from the Madonnine Mountains. Fantastic wines coming from that area. Then you have Mount Etna. They have a red version and a white version. That's also a blend of 2 different varietals. And then you have Loro DOC, which is typically 100% Nero d'Avola. It's usually more of a structured Nero d'Avola. And then you have the generic Sicilia DOC, which is found all over the island. That's predominantly also Nero d'Avola dominant wines, but also Perricone dominant wines. So what's the first Sicilian wine you should try? I'd recommend you go with Catarratto, and I would recommend you taste 100% Catarratto. And I found the best one on the island. It's from the Castellucimiano estate. This is Valle d'Olmo DOC, 100% Catarratto. It's medium bodied, super aromatic. The perfumes are extremely seductive. And then it's super crispy on the back and this little minerality finish. Beautiful, beautiful wine. And then the first red you should try is definitely Nero d'Avola, the king of red wine in Sicily. And like I said earlier, you know, Nero d'Avola is different depending on where it's coming from on the island, but it's almost always fruit forward and lightly spicy on the back. If you're already familiar with Nero d'Avola, I highly recommend you taste this, because from the Castellucimiano estate again, because this is an artisanal version of Nero d'Avola. They only make 20,000 bottles. That's bottles a year, all done by hand up in the Madonnine Mountains. So if you think you know Nero d'Avola, or you are a big fan of Nero d'Avola, highly recommend you check this out and taste the difference. Make sure you subscribe to Gladiator Wine TV so you don't miss out on new videos about artisanal Italian wines and more. And remember, great wines are not made in great numbers.